This episode of the Better 2 podcast is brought to you by Kitty Mystic and DM Needham, author of My Days with the Dark Muse, as well as Love is Worth Waiting For. Hi gang, Donna here. Thanks for tuning into the Better 2 podcast. Today's guest is somebody that you've heard his name mentioned several times over since the beginning. Actually, I think it was the end of last season, Rich Zai. He is of Third Ear Audio Production, and he does the sound for the show and does produce it. Well, today he sits down with me, and unfortunately, it's kind of a two-part show because we had some issues with Zoom and the internet, and we had a little bit of that today as well. But we sit down and we talk about how he got into being a producer and being an engineer. And we go on a journey of talking about touring, talking about what it's like, and how his humble beginnings led him to where he is today. So enjoy.
What you need to do is you need to do that the way Mark Maron does, and you just sort of turn it on at some point, and just do you know how many beginning of his podcasts are he and the guest saying, "Are we recording? When are you going to start recording?" "Oh, we've been recording for the last 10 minutes. "Oh, great. You heard me tell that story. Fantastic. The world did not need to know that." Yeah, well, they know now.
Well, I just, with you, it's like this, usually I have my nice sheet of paper, with all the notes and everything, but you don't have anything. With Sarah, I don't have anything. There's several people that have been on the show more than once that don't have a list of prep because.
Well, why? And by the way, I'm the sound guy. What prep do you need for me? Exactly that much. I saw that look on your face. Exactly that much.
Well, yeah, you're the sound guy, and I mean, this is definitely going to start off just wild and woolly because I'm not going to formally introduce Rich. This is Rich. That's as far as I'm going to go. You've heard his name at the end of the show over and over again for the last season and a half, and this is the end of season 5.
Or is it the beginning of season 6?
No, it's the end of season 5.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
This is going to be the last one.
This is going to be the last one. You're going to follow Sarah.
Nobody can follow Sarah.
Well,
that's okay. You know what you've really done is you've turned me into the comic that goes on after Chappelle shows up at the Comedy Store at 10 o'clock and does 2 hours. It's like, how do you follow that? I get to follow. All right.
Well, especially because Sarah and I are usually, we do get in some interesting conversations.
Okay, so I have to go back and actually listen to all of that one instead of just spotting. So just so you know what my process is, because not that it should change anything, and I'm going to bore every listener to tears right here. I believe it or not, I don't listen all the way through every episode.
Oh, I know that.
So I have a couple of the front tag and the back tag are currently just set up and always the same. It's everything in the middle that's different. Unless I sit there and go, guess what? I have a musical guest, and we're going to play 3 songs from the record, and then I'm going to give you just a crap fest to do. And you're going to throw it at me, and you're going to have everything that doesn't line up right because whatever you're using on your Mac doesn't have the same time code. Yay! Nope. Good times. Yay! Because what the hard part of that was the part that you were listening to, and we're talking about, okay, I need this to be here. You didn't take into account the front bumper of the show, so the show's intro theme.
No, I didn't.
That amount of time and the amount of time you were speaking.
No.
Do you have any idea how much harder it made my job?
I'm sorry. I apologized profusely back then,
but you're an old radio girl. You should know better.
Yeah, I'm an old radio.
And by the way, I'm not editing a single bit of this out, just so the world knows.
Yeah, but I could.
You won't. You could. You could, and monkeys could fly out of my ears.
But let's be honest. Let's be honest. I was not a professionally trained disc jockey. I didn't go to school to become a disc jockey. This was my training. Hey, you got the job. It's Tuesday. You have the job. Friday, you're going to be on air. Okay. And we're going to have somebody.
That sounds like the first job I got. The first job I got doing running stage monitors at a rock club. It was, hey, you're standing here. This is where everybody starts.
And you're going to have somebody with you for the whole air shift, which will be 4 hours. Okay. Half hour in. Well, you've sat with Todd enough. Todd taught you everything you need to know, and you're running it better than most people that I went to school with. So here you go. Okay.
I got tapped on the shoulder and said, "Hey, I'm going to go meet this chick in the dressing room." Well, okay then.
I wonder what happened then. No.
I can neither confirm nor deny it was Bible study.
So we're digressing. I'm not even
okay. So now that everybody who normally would be listening to the show has changed and gone to listen to anyone else.
You never know. They might find us rather amusing because it's just, crazy.
Weird. Well, and we're following Sarah, so this is actually probably pretty normal.
This is true, except there's not any. We haven't had any F-bombs yet.
Oh, it's early yet. It's early.
So, as we've talked about, you are my sound person, and I have to say, I really wouldn't have a podcast without him because the mic I have and the little mixer is per Rich. So Rich has helped me launch the Better Two podcast, and for a long time, I was doing this without his help, and he kept saying, "Why haven't you asked me for help?" Because
And let's call a monkey a monkey. It was bad.
Thank you.
Audio. No, the audio quality was bad. Not the content. The content was fine, but you don't do this for a living.
No.
So there you go.
No, I don't.
It would be like me trying to read cards. I look at them and I believe Stephen Wright said it best. I played poker with a deck of tarot cards. I got a full house and 8 people died.
Well, I'm sure you could read cards if you tried. But anyway, so why? Okay, let's just forget about the podcast for a minute. So why did you decide you wanted to be a sound guy, and what made you decide to be a sound guy?
Funny story. And one of the primary characters in this story doesn't really remember it, either the way it happened or it at all. And I'll explain why. It was the 70s. September 23rd, 1979, Chicago's International Amphitheater, one of the greatest spectacles in rock and roll was playing. That would be Kiss. On the tour for the Dynasty record, which was, I believe, technically called the Return to Kiss tour. Okay, sorry, Return to Planet Kiss tour. For those that aren't Kiss nutballs like I am, they are. Kiss was sort of on the backside of the 70s wave. That was the final tour of the original band. Peter Criss left shortly after that tour, and then came back really briefly for most of the recording of the next record, but never toured with the next record. And then Ace quit, and blah blah blah. Right. So my uncle Ken, bless his heart, it had a bit of a side hustle in the 70s, known as Colombian Gold. And my grandmother, he was living at my grandparents' house, and my grandmother found his stash. Now, I don't know depending on which of my uncles or my dad, or if you talk to my dad about it, Ken was moving weight, but I don't know this. I have no idea. They went to every concert there was. Ken never paid for a ticket.
I've heard stories from my father that after him and my mom separated, that he was living with a bunch of guys and they were moving some stuff. And my dad even had a pager back then. And, of course he was for his auto business.
Sure.
But yeah, I think
Ken wasn't, I don't,
that happened.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't remember Ken having a job back then, but I was 9. So there's a lot of that stuff that's kind of fuzzy. So, when the Kiss show comes up, and I was a Kiss fan. I was 6 years old. The kid across the street, his name was Robert Page, came home with a copy of Love Gun. Okay. And I went, blah, what is this? This is the most awesome thing ever. I have to know everything there is about this. We would put on our own Kiss concerts in his living room. Actually, very old school. You walked into the living room. There was the little side den, which had the stairs that went to the upstairs. Well, that was the perfect drum riser or a place to go aerial off the risers on the stage. If you open the inside of the inside cover of Alive 2, you see the dragon heads and they're on the platforms and stuff. Yeah, that was our platform. We were nerds. We were total nerds.
What did you play in your version of Kiss?
Oh, I was Ace Frehley. I was always Ace Frehley. I was Ace Frehley. They're like, but you're taller than us and you should be Gene. I'm like, fuck Gene, he's an asshole. I didn't even know that. I just looked at him. I'm like, no, Ace, Spaceman.
Okay. I'm gonna give you something that nobody really knows. So my parents had split, and my friend, I was over at my friend's house, and he had gotten a Kiss record. I don't remember which one, but all I remember is being in his bedroom and having an army helmet, and I was the drummer. That's all I remember. And I don't know the Kiss members totally by name.
That would have been Peter Criss.
That's what I thought, but
that would have been the Catman.
I didn't want to misspeak. So yeah,
right.
So I was Peter Criss, and I was just drummer. I wanted to be a drummer. I always wanted to be a drummer, but I ended up being a bass player. But there you go.
Well, we all can't be perfect.
No.
Sorry. We are perfect. Everyone else is, drummers. It's drummers and guitar players.
But see, I understand your mock band. I get it.
Right. And but Ace was my guy. Ace was always my guy. I always thought he was the coolest. I thought the Ace Frehley songs were better than everybody else's. And back then, in the early days of Kiss, the first, say, 6 records, Ace would get a song on the album. Peter would get a song on the album. There would be a couple of Gene songs. It's sort of like the Beatles. There's a couple of Gene songs. There was a couple of Paul songs. There was a couple of Gene and Paul songs. And then they threw Peter and Ace a bone. One of the bones they threw Peter was Beth, which was at the time the only song that ever charted, which to this day chaps Gene Simmons' ass.
Really?
That the first song that hit for Kiss was a ballad.
It is one of those popular songs everybody does.
He is pissed off to this day. It's kind of like Neil Schon. Neil Schon of Journey is still mad that Steve Perry was in the band because suddenly he was getting laid. I swear to God. Because he's been pissed off at Steve Perry for decades because of the tight pants. It's hilarious. So Ken couldn't take his girlfriend to the show, his girlfriend who really wanted to see Kiss. He had to take me.
Aww.
Right. So I, of course, get all dolled up in my Ace Frehley outfit, which was just hilarious. My aunts were, so I'm from a giant family. And my Uncle Ken is my second oldest uncle. Okay. Or sorry, my second youngest uncle. So there's one that my Uncle Joe is 6 years my senior. Ken is 8 years my senior. Okay. So Ken took me to see Kiss and we were section C, seat 22, row C.
Wow.
Right? Yeah. In here, burned into my brain.
Obviously.
Judas Priest opened the show. Okay. So Judas Priest opening for Kiss. That was the third time. It was the third show on the tour and the last show that the thundercloud lightning laser effect worked. Right. Exactly. Yeah. So, and they didn't open with Detroit Rock City. It was the first time that they had ever not used Detroit Rock City as the opener since they wrote the song. Yeah, like I said, it made a bit of an impression.
This was your first concert?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
All right, so I get it. All right.
So I'm sitting there on Ace Frehley's side of the stage. So the entire show, I'm watching my hero, bigger than life.
Mm-hmm.
And there's lasers and there's bombs and everybody's wasted. I got my first high at 9 years old because you couldn't breathe in the when they knocked the International Amphitheater down, there was a cloud of pot smoke from 77 that left from when Led Zeppelin played there in the 70s.
Yeah.
But that was it. And when they, King of the Night, they opened with King of the Nighttime World, and when the risers started coming down and the emphasis and accents on the King were just explosions and fireballs, I was like, I want to do that. I don't know what that is. I'm 9 years old. I don't know what it is, but I want to do that the rest of my life. And here we are.
that's you're not exactly doing that, but per se, but you are doing it.
Well, I figured out that I was the world's lamest bass player. I'm sorry, not the world's lamest, the world's okayest bass player.
Okay.
Flash forward a few years. I'm a freshman in high school. I desperately want to learn how to play guitar. Except the guitar's got too many strings. And I know that that's an old lame joke that, there's an old story. A guy's teaching his son how to play guitar. So he's teaching him every chord, every first position chord on the low E string. Once he gets to the G string, his kid comes in the next day and he's got a case in his hand. And his dad says, "Okay, you ready for your lesson?" "Nah, Dad, you taught me enough bass. I'm going to go play in a band." So, so that's, so flash forward to high school. And like I said, obsessed with Kiss and rock and roll in general. I mean, my uncles decided that I was way too into Kiss. So one year for my birthday, I got 3 of the oddest records I had ever gotten in my life. And I was probably 10 or 12. So my uncle's, again, trying to get me away from Kiss.
Mm-hmm.
I got a Leatherwolf record.
Okay.
Which was, I believe, Out Hunting is the name of the record. It's their second one. 2112 by Rush. And Dog and Butterfly by Heart.
Okay.
They're throwing everything at the wall to see if something sticks. I was listening to everything. I mean, I'm a child of what you could call hippies, faded hippies. So our record collection went everything from the Hair soundtrack to the Beatles to Elvis to Bread. Had I even considered that they would be worth anything, I would have taken way better care of a lot of those records.
I actually have some of my parents' records.
Well, my folks had like original first edition pressings of Meet the Beatles, of music from the Big Pink, and we didn't, it's like there was a song on it I didn't like. We'd take it like a sewing needle and scratch it out because we didn't like that song.
Oh, you bastard!
We were. So who knew that those things were going to be worth a damn thing?
Well, it amazes me now. If you go to Half Price Books, it's like a 12-inch that, back in the 80s when I bought a 12-inch there, it was like $1 something, which I have
now they're 25. Now they're $20.
Yeah, a record we paid $7 for is $25. It's like, what the hell?
Well, inflation, and we're dumb enough to go buy it a fifth time, depending.
No, actually, I'm not dumb. I never got rid of them.
Well, there you go.
I have quite the extensive LP collection.
I have. Speaking of that, I've got a turntable upstairs that I keep swearing I'm going to take over to get fixed. I know where to take it.
I have a turntable that plugs right into the computer, sitting in a box. I've had it for 5 years, and I'm always like, I'm going to be able to put this on. Nope.
No. I've got speakers. I've got a receiver. I got everything sitting upstairs ready to put in a pretty decent system. I just have to go get the turntable fixed, and I bought it on eBay at the beginning of the pandemic, and it came in and it didn't work, and the guy was being a dick, so I didn't bother. But anyway,
I think we still have ours too, but I have an Atari like that. I did get it fixed and it does work.
Well, there you go.
But Atari 2600.
So flash forward to high school, a few years. And I was always musical. I have an aunt who is a very dear friend of my father's, my godmother. And I always had whatever the cool electronic thing was. So when the Walkmans hit, I got a Walkman radio. When the cassettes hit, I got a Walkman cassette player. The last thing she gave me was a Walkman CD player.
A
Discman. For like my 18th birthday, I got one of those from her, which I used to have. I had when I owned the sound company. That was my put the CD in to play music between bands while we were doing changeover. I still had it, and it finally died. It finally died on a show, so I got a lot of work out of that one. But I was caddying at Park Ridge Country Club. I'm a Chicago kid, for those of you that can't tell from my accent. And I used to caddy at one of the local country clubs, and I saved my caddy money for a day, and I bought the 3 records that changed my life.
And they are?
a band called Talus out of Buffalo, New York. Bass player is the only one anybody knows of. Billy Sheehan, who played in Mr. Big and David Lee Roth's band and Sons of Apollo. He was in Grand Funk Railroad for a minute and a half. He was in He was in like a reunited UFO for 20 minutes. Bass player, has bass, will travel, but that was Billy Sheehan's band in Buffalo. So before he moved west and joined, actually was almost going to join Van Halen, but that's a whole other story. But their record Live Speed on Ice, which is their live record, and it was cool. The record, again, going back to us being kids, the album cover was awesome. And then I put it on and I heard Billy play and I was like, what is that? That's a thing. I don't know what that thing is going to be, but I want to do that. Bass guitar, Billy Sheehan. Mom, I want to be a bass player. I want to play bass. Kind of. Gene Simmons plays bass. Paul McCartney plays bass. You love Paul McCartney. I should play bass. That's how I ended up with my first bass.
It's much easier though as a boy to go to your parents and say I want to play bass versus being a girl and saying I want to play bass.
Well, only, but in my world, my father was a roofer, and my mother was in the medical field, and I'm the oldest of five. Okay. So I wasn't playing a bass. My dad used to say, "Oh, you're going fishing." What do you mean? Well, your bass is in your hand. That was funny. Once, the 3,000th time, I flipped them off.
Do you remember black O-ring bracelets?
Yeah.
Okay, I used to wear them all the time, and my stepfather would be like, "So, you're going to go out and change the oil in the car?"
Yeah, I had my fair share of those cracks as well. But anyway, the other two records were 1984 by Van Halen, which in the summer of 1984, it was kind of hard to find a bigger record than that, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And started the path of finding the guy who actually was writing the soundtrack of my life at the time, which was Shout at the Devil by Motley Crue. Okay. Now, I kind of pulled a fast one on my parents, because I actually picked up also a copy of Sports by Huey Lewis and the News, but switched the albums because I knew my parents would throw away the Motley record because it's black with a pentacle on it. How could they not?
Right.
And then I got, for my birthday later that summer, for my birthday, I got the Walkman. So I went out and bought a copy of Shout at the Devil on cassette and played it until it died, and then bought another one. I probably owned Shout at the Devil the second most times of all the records I've purchased. I probably owned 150 copies of it, because I'll buy it and then I'll lose it, or I'll give it to someone, or it'll, like in the old cassette days, I'd rip the tape or whatever, and But yeah, so that's how that happened. I got a bass from a kid named Ed Nikolic, who was a freshman, who also was a bass player in high school, and he taught me how to play Freebird, which is hilarious.
Most people don't know this, but if you're in a band or you hang out with people that are in a band and you go to the nightclub or the club, almost every time, I don't care what kind of band it is, you're going to hear somebody scream, "Play Freebird!"
Now, I can tell, what you don't know, my dear friend, is that I know the reason that is actually a thing.
Well, please tell me, because I don't know. I always just go, whatever.
There was a DJ here in Chicago named Kevin Matthews. Kevin Matthews was awesome, and he was one of the greatest guys. And there was a period of time when Chicago radio, when Chicago radio was completely and totally off the chain awesome. Okay. So you had what boiled down to the two guys that invented shock radio, Steve and Gary. You had Jonathan Brandmeier. You had Kevin Matthews. You had a guy named Ed Till in the evenings. And Kevin Matthews was the midday guy, and Kev was incredible. He did parody songs. He was funny. He introduced the world to Bill Hicks. He introduced me to Frank Zappa. But that Kev was joking in his shows and and they would do concerts. Like they would have 20,000 people at the Rosemont Horizon for what they would call loop stock. And it would finish with Kev doing an hour, or with Kev doing a half an hour, Steve and Gary doing a half an hour, Brandmeier, Johnny in the Leisure Suits doing Brandmeier songs, because that's what it was. Because Steve Dahl in the 70s used to do, when Steve Dahl started those some of you would know, Steve Dahl started the Disco Sucks movement.
Which is actually something that is historic now. I mean, you
right.
That comes
Disco
up,
Demolition.
Yeah.
Disco Demolition comes up every July.
Yes.
And Steve was Disco Demolition. They had the 40th anniversary last year, 2 years ago. And really what's funny is, to this day, Steve's like, I didn't think this was going to happen like it happened. It's not my fault. We were just going to go to the Sox game and blow up a couple of records and just go watch the Sox game and drink beer. We didn't know that they were going to have 80,000 people in Comiskey Park. It only held about 42. People were hanging off the walls. And so anybody who doesn't know Chicago, or who might know Chicago baseball, when you hit a home run, when the Sox hit a home run at Comiskey Park, they shoot off fireworks. So they've got an in-house pyro guy. Well, to get to see the White Sox and the Orioles at this doubleheader, which became Disco Demolition, and I know that I'm off on a tangent, but that's okay. What happened was, because the loops frequency was 98. It was 98. It became 98.7, but it was 98. Or sorry, 97.9 is what it became later. But it was 98 on the old analog radio dial. Well, for 98 cents in a disco record, you got in to see both games of a doubleheader,
which is crazy.
Which is insane. It's insane.
Although I will say this. My first concert was Olivia Newton-John at LSU Assembly Center. I had gotten the tickets from somebody who won them off the radio, but face value of the ticket was $12.75.
Yeah.
So let's that's putting that in a little perspective, because now, right. Yeah, tickets are crazy.
Yeah. Well, and a beer at the ballpark was $4.
Yeah.
I mean, a beer at the ballpark when I was 21 and going to Sox games, the beer at the ballpark was $6, and we thought it was cheap. We were like, God, how expensive is this? Well, yeah. Perspective. Yeah. But yeah, they had a dumpster, a literal dumpster of disco records in center field, and the pyro guys like tripled the amount of boom of boom stuff that was in there. And when that sucker went boom, it blew a giant crater in the middle of out in center field. The White Sox had to forfeit the next game. So this was supposed to happen in between games of a doubleheader, and then fans rushed the field. Jimmy Pearsall's going crazy and calling them hooligans and everything else is hilarious. And I was at that game too, because I seem to be right next to the guy doing the stuff that happens. But anyhow, so we started playing bass. I started listening to Shout at the Devil. That became. Nikki, I've said before, Nikki Sixx has literally been writing the soundtrack of my life since I was 14.
All I got to say is I hope to God that you did not go 7 days without toilet paper and showering and still picking up chicks. That's from his
yeah,
book.
No, I remember.
Yeah, I'm sure.
No. I have standards. Not many. They're not high, but I have some.
All I could think was, and this is from Heroin Diaries, people, all I could think when I read that was, ew. I don't care I don't care if he's a bass player in a band. That's just ew.
But when you are, yes, you and I, who are fairly together with it happening people, who kind of understand what, life and stuff, that to us would be gross. There's no way that I would ever do that. I mean, admittedly, I work from home, so there are occasions that I go 2 days without a shower, and it happens, and then I will turn the wrong way and go, okay, lunchtime's here, it's time for But I don't do it on purpose.
No, I get that. I get that, and I'm guilty as well.
Well, and you read the book, so you know that he did it on a bet.
No, I did not pick up on that part. I was too blown away. It's like my mind was scarred after I read the fact that he did that. I was scarred.
He and Mars had a $25,000 bet.
Okay.
to see who could go longer without changing their clothes, their stage clothes. So it's just their stage clothes. Now, Nikki, because Nikki is who he is, took it 2 steps too far and slept in the leather pants, wore those same leather pants for 6 weeks. And Mars at that point is like, okay, dude, fine, you win.
No, we're talking about 2 different things, because what I'm talking about is he went 6 days. He had no toilet paper in his house.
Oh, that one. Yeah.
No shower. He was freaking higher than a kite, and he's still banging people.
Because, well, yeah, but junkies, the junkies.
Yeah, I know, but it's just still, ew. I didn't even remember the leather pants bit. So now you've even gone more of ew. But anyway.
Sorry.
So good.
Minor distraction. So anyway, actually, oddly enough, the band that I'm working with. So we started playing bass. I was not the greatest bass player in the world. Much like my idol. I tried. I was mediocre at best. But the thing I was always doing was I always had the cool gear before anyone else did, because I worked for my dad in the summers. So when my buddies were sitting there running around the world going to the beach, I was on a roof. But I was making $20 an hour at 16, and they were begging for change. So by the time it got to, I had really good gear, and I had some interesting connections along the way. One of my first bass rigs I purchased was in the tour pack from John Panazzo. John Panazzo, right? I can never remember the Panazzo brother. The bass player from Styx.
Okay.
So there's the brothers Rob and John, and I don't know why, but in my brain I always get the 2 of them mixed up all the time, and they couldn't be more different because one's dead, but that's another story. But that's what I bought. So I roll up to rehearsal with a band, and all of my stuff's in road cases with the REO Speedwagon logos, or with the Styx logo spray painted on the side.
Nice.
And these guys are like, bro, what? So they always thought I was better than I really was, because my gear was better than all of theirs. So, but ultimately I spend a lot of my time hanging out with the sound guys. And maybe it comes from being in a construction family, where my grandfather always taught us that, you treat, you make sure that you treat the guy sweeping up the floors as good or better as you treat the CEO. And that's, so I figured out pretty quick that the guys that were doing sound were the guys that were there to, like Henry Rollins said, they're here 2 hours before you get here and are here 5 hours after you leave. Nobody needs your prima donna crap. Absolutely true. Mm-hmm. So those are the guys that I would hang out with, and I would talk with, and I had a wireless, so I had a wireless bass rig, so I would hang out in front of house, kind of dialing in our sound, as it were, and I would tip the sound guy, and then I got to be friends with him, and at one point or another, and I kind of don't know exactly how it happened, to be 100% honest with you. But one summer I was hanging out, and it seemed like I was working more shows behind the scenes than I was on stage. And I was missing a lot of rehearsals because I was set, we've got load in for this festival or that gig or this other thing. And eventually I sold my drummer all of my gear in one shot. He's like, well, I'll give you $2,500 for all of it. And I needed both a car and rent. So I was like, sold, bro. And I regret that, because the one bass that was in that rig was a complete and total freakishly awesome bass that I wish I'd never gotten rid of. And it still hurts me to this day that I got rid of that one. And I've tried to find it. It's this weird hodgepodge of new and old and ancient parts, and it really should not be anything that should be played. But it was awesome, and it fit me, and it weighed like 40 pounds. It was a swamp ash body. It was an oiled swamp ash body, so the thing weighed like 21 pounds.
Wow.
With a brass pick guard and a brass bass whammy bar, which was like 4 pounds on its own, because it was milled out of pieces of solid brass. Mm-hmm. So it weighed a ton. So the whole bass weighed like 1,000,000 pounds. and I didn't care. I had like a 5-inch wide clear Strat because it was awesome. But that's, and that's how it ended up happening, is I just sort of became a sound guy because I wasn't that great as a bass player, and these guys were cool, and I was getting paid.
And you still wanted to be part of the music industry.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I never really wanted to stray too far away. I tried managing a band for about 5 minutes. It seemed like I got them one gig. We didn't get paid for it. I was like, this sucks, and I'm going to go back to humping gear. And it took about 3 years for me to save up enough money that I bought the company. Well, I didn't buy the company. I bought one of the PA systems. So then I had my own PA rig, and I would so if Big Mark had the big stage, I had the kids stage. While I was still trying to kind of get my feet wet, and I miss Mark. Mark passed away a few years ago, but there are some people that we are mutually friends with that would tell you that I learned all the wrong things from Mark, and one of the things that I didn't learn was how to run an actual business. And she's not wrong.
She's always right.
I say to this day that I learned a lot of things from Mark, but the things that I should have learned more was how not to do stuff.
But nobody ever tells you that, really.
No, but I'm smarter than that, and I should have known. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things when I look back, it's like you should know better, but you still do it.
Yeah, and then came. So I worked my way. I worked my way up to actually touring. I toured for a bunch of some bands people know, some bands they don't. My very first tour.
Okay. You're jumping ahead of something, because I want to say this, and I'm not giving a plug to anybody, but most musicians end up working at a music store, and you did work at a music store.
Well, yes, I did. I worked at Guitar Center for a little while, which was,
an interesting event, but we'll just leave it at that. But I just wanted to cover that because it's not an unusual progression to go from.
No. So musicians are fundamentally cheap and broke, which makes it fun. Which makes it's fun because and James Hetfield from Metallica said, when you can't afford any of the cool gear, you can't play any of it. But then when you can afford anything you want, everyone wants to give you equipment. And he always thought that was backwards. I don't necessarily disagree with him. So I worked at Guitar Center for a little while. I tried to parlay my being a sound guy in clubs with making money at Guitar Center, and thinking, this is logic for you. The logic I had in my head was, okay, if I work at Guitar Center, then I can get microphones and gear at a discount so that I could use it in my PA and stuff. And clearly, if I'm working at Guitar Center, I'm working with all these musicians. They're all my buddies. When they have money to spend, they're going to come spend it with me. That's a lie.
Yeah.
Maury determined that's a lie, because musicians are cheap. are cheap. And that's not so much that they're cheap. They're very, very selective. We'll just call it that. So I worked at Guitar Center for a while. It was Guitar Center in a weird spot. So it was the old Clark Street store at Clark and Halstead in Chicago, which is significant for a couple of reasons. One, it's right on the edge of where all of the gay bars are, but at that time there was no live music in any of those bars, which was weird. I never understood that. There were a couple of really amazing recording studios really close to there, but none of those guys ever wanted to talk to me. And there's a couple of the best of some of the most storied clubs in Chicago: the Cabaret Metro, Kingston Mines, Buddy Guys Legends, Blues, etc. All of those clubs were within walking distance of Guitar Center. Except, see previous statement, musicians are very selective with the few dollars they have, also known as cheap. And they have a tendency to, at least the musicians I was dealing with, had a tendency to prefer cocktails and picking up girls to buying strings for their guitar.
Well, let's be honest. Hold that thought. Let's be honest. how many people get into music for the wrong reasons? Me included. How many do?
Gene Simmons, bless his black heart, said to Oprah Winfrey live on the Oprah Winfrey Show that all guys are getting bands for pussy and cash. Live on the Oprah Winfrey Show, the woman was like poleaxed. He's like, no, exactly. It's for pussy and cash.
It's true. I mean, I'm not going to deny it.
And he said, any musician that tells you that they're in it for the artistic integrity is full of shit. Okay, Gene.
I remember when my stepdaughter, she's like, I learned how to play bass. I'm like, did you realize that? Because she got a bass at 16. I'm like, do you realize that I used to play bass? She goes, no. I'm like, yeah. And she wasn't living with me at the time. And she's like, yeah, but I'm going to be a bass player. So I'm going to tell you this right now. Unless you're passionate about the music, you got a long road ahead of you.
It's a long and hard and grindy road. And
I said,
and grimy even.
I said, I got into it for the wrong reasons. And as much as I like playing bass, which I haven't done in a while, I got into it for the wrong reasons. And I admit that.
We all did. Mm-hmm. I was going to be, the thing about it is, sort of going back to when I started playing, I didn't understand how much work was involved to learn how to play it. I thought you put it around your neck and you were on stage with Kiss.
Here, I didn't have that problem because my friend and I were we had a guitar teacher. He taught guitar and bass, and she wanted to learn guitar, and she had tiny little hands, so guitar was a good thing for her because her hands could handle and to me, I have the big clunky hands. So we go and we take the bass. Yeah, he'd teach me in 15 minutes, and she'd take the rest of the time. We're still paying the same price. And he'd we go back to the next class, and I think I'd practice maybe for 30 minutes, and I come back, and at the next lesson, he's like, so you must have been practicing all week. And I'm just sitting there going, no.
Well, some people have it and some people don't. I didn't.
No, and I'm not bragging. It was just one of those things where it's like, and she would sit there and struggle because guitar is a lot harder, and I admit that. So, yeah, I liked playing, and I still enjoy playing, but it's just, what am I going to do now, Going to play bass by myself? Uh-oh. Oh, here we go. You froze.
I did. You did. I was watching myself moving. It was you. You were.
I was moving too, so there you go. But anyway, so I mean, what am I going to do? Play by myself? I know that's open-ended, and you can go somewhere, but let's not go there. And you froze again. God damn it. I hate my internet. I hate my internet. I really hate my internet.
Yeah, right?
I don't know what you said. You're just like, and that was it.
I said you can't put you can't put things like that on a tee for me. I'm gonna swing every time.
Well, and the computer god said, "No, you're not."
Yeah. Anyway. But yeah, so like I said, I started hanging out with the sound guy.
Oh, God damn it! What the actual fuckity fuck?
All right. So here's what
you actually started hanging out with the sound guy.
Right. I was going to say, why don't we do this?
Sign off and come back in?
Why don't we put it, we can either do that or we can come in when it's not 3:30 in the afternoon and everybody's streaming there and everybody's streaming.
It's not that. It did this earlier today too. Make it easy for myself. Go ahead.
Oh, come on. Smile. It could be worse.
Oh, it always could be worse.
Right.
It's actually a pretty good day. Anyway.
Yeah, no, generally, you're not wrong. So where did we leave off?
We left off with, dare I say the word before Zoom decides we're not going to exist, about you going on tour.
Oh, okay. So, yeah. So I will reach back and catch some of the some of the highlights. Working from a music store in Florida, Thoroughbred Music. Not there anymore, unfortunately, which is kind of a shame because it was a really cool, weird music store, and I think the world needs more cool, weird music stores. But but that's a whole other conversation for a whole other time. But no, I was working for Thoroughbred Music, and then was working through them. I was working at basically every club in the greater Tampa area. There's a neighborhood down there called Deep Ellum, which is where all the nightlife is. Rock bars next to. What's that?
Dallas has that area too. And
yes,
it's called Deep
I'm
Ellum
sorry.
as well.
It's not Deep Ellum. You're right. That's the Dallas Fort Worth one. I'm drawing a blank on what it is in Tampa now because my brain doesn't work like it used to.
Okay.
Oh God, what the hell is that neighborhood now? It's gonna drive me crazy until I remember, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it's gonna pop into my head.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially, it's like much like Deep Ellum in Dallas. Is it actually Dallas or is that Austin?
It's Dallas.
Is
It's
it Dallas?
Dallas because I used to go, and I used to
Okay.
have a really cool bar called the Video Bar that used to have video screens and
Yeah, I'm friends with Jason McMaster from Dangerous Toys, and they're generally from Austin, but they played a lot in the Dallas area, the Austin, San Antonio. They're from basically Austin, San Antonio, and played in Dallas a lot. So, I've had those conversations with Jason about that neighborhood a lot. But that said, working at a bunch of bars, working at clubs, had my system and had basically everything about as wired up as I could have, to quote a Chicago expression. I had 5 nights a week I was working. I was going out and partying one night a week and had my Monday and Tuesday were my days off. I was living with a girl that was a bartender. Well, we were sort of living together. My stuff lived, my 3 duffel bags lived in her apartment, but I don't know that I would call that my address. The people that owned Thoroughbred at the time owned a condo right on Clearwater Beach, and that was kind of all the guys that were touring and working there that didn't really have an apartment. That was our address. So just kind of, it was the John and Donna, the people that ran Thoroughbred, were some really, really great people. And when he passed away, that was a big hit to the general community, which is kind of a bummer. But anyway, through them, there was a music store in the Chicago area called Gann Music and Sound that did a lot of the same sort of stuff in the Midwest. And that was small club tours. I'd say venues 1,500 seats and below. So if you're in the Chicago area, they would supply sound for everything from local nightclubs like the Thirsty Whale up to, say, the Vic Theater, the Riv. More like the Riv. The Riv's a little bigger than the Vic. Oh yeah, they did stuff at Double Door, places like that all the time. That size back in the day. So working for them, I was actually, with a funny story, weird funny story. Before I had gotten the gig with the Spin Doctors, and that was 17 dates in 41 days. 17 shows in 41 days.
Okay.
Which was a big. It was night. We had no nights off. Well, we technically had a couple of days off in between venues, but we were touring in a Winnebago. So it was a motorhome with a trailer, 16-foot trailer behind us, and we started in Clearwater and we went up into Delaware, and then back down. So it was just this little loop. Yeah.
Now, I know who the Spin Doctors are, but for the audience that may not know who the Spin Doctors are, what was one of their biggest hits?
Pocket Full of Two Princes, Pocket Full of Kryptonite, Cleopatra's Cat, which was their second big single. What's really funny is the song is they were a New York jam band. Okay. They were a jazz-based jam band. So everything that they did live was completely not what you would expect. And they had an MTV video hit with Pocket Full of Kryptonite that just exploded. Mm-hmm. And it was like all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, we want to be like them. And it was fantastic, except what they were, I knew a guy back in the day who was the sound guy for the Romantics in their big MTV 80s heyday. And he told me a story that was very similar with the Romantics. And when I tell how this relates is that it was the exact same thing with the Spin Doctors. The guys in the Romantics were actually a bunch of like drunken, drug-addled, like, psychos. They were completely not what you see in the Secrets That You Keep videos and all the stuff that their polished up, shiny MTV image that kind of happened. Kind of like the Beatles, where when the Beatles were in Germany, they were essentially these dirt balls, these like biker dirt balls that Brian Epstein polished up, and then the world knows the Beatles. Kind of like that with the Romantics, except that when they got on stage from this massive world tour, U.S. tour, they were headlining 60,000 seaters. I mean, big venues. Mm-hmm. The drummer comes out and he's, throwing Jack Daniels bottles at people in the front row, and he's just right. Not what all the little girls that all the little MTV girls, the little like 13, 14-year-olds that have their Secrets That You Keep flats and stuff. And they go backstage and the drummer's like, "Hey, how you doing?" Yeah. Dude, she's 14. Oh, even better if we had two of them. Can it be a 28? Awesome. Right.
See, I've read stories. I've read stories from some bands, NXS, Duran, that their tour people put on the itinerary, each city, the legal age.
Oh yeah, that actually is an old that comes from our friends in Grand Funk Railroad, because you've heard the song "We're an American Band." Yeah, that stuff happened, and the hotel detective, little Connie, was 17 years old in 1968 when she met those guys. I mean, that stuff was for real. Less of an issue with me when I got to tour, when I was touring, because all of that stuff with the Spin Doctors happened before I worked with them. Okay. So we used to joke, the club that I worked at here in Chicago, and the one Gasoline Alley, which is the one in Tampa that I miss, and it's gone. They had a fire in the kitchen and it burned to the ground, and it was a heartbreak because it was a really fun club, had a really great vibe. But the Thirsty Whale, which is the kind of the mecca here in Chicago, that all the rock guys, Julianne, my wife, refers to it as the cult of the Thirsty Whale, the cult of River Grove. And yes, it was. The 2,500 of us that were there every weekend, still to this day, 35 years after it closed, we're still like, "Oh, I miss that place so much. So much of my childhood." Yeah, well, when you don't go to clubs and you're not a musician and you don't hang out with bands, lots of people don't understand what that's all about. But my son's 24, Jordan's 24, and I really wish he would have had a place like that to hang out and understand the vibe that we had, that all of the guys my age and my generation had, playing in bands and hanging out with bands and doing sound, and just that community we had. But anyway, so we were at the Whale. We used to say that you would see bands on their way up and on their way down, because we had a lot of bands that would come through the Whale like in a van on their first tour ever, their first club tour. And then a year later, they'd be there in a broken down tour bus playing on again. And after the second record stiffed, they can't find anywhere else to play. Yeah. They'd play the Whale. Stevie Rochelle, who runs Metal Sludge, tells some really great stories about playing the Whale multiple times in his band Tough. They had an MTV hit called "I Hate Kissing You Goodbye." Look it up. It's hair metal power ballads at its finest. Stevie looked more like a chick than he did a guy. That's another story.
Well, that's the whole dude looks like a lady moment. Anyway.
Yep. But so touring went out with the Spin Doctors, had a great time. They were great guys. They were a whole lot of fun. Chris lost his voice and ended up having to go in for surgery. The reason to tour that tour he was strong. His voice was really strong, but all the way through, about 2/3 of the way through, it started to fail. He developed polyps on his lymph nodes, or developed polyps on his vocal cords. So he had to, he couldn't sing basically. So they had to kill the tour. I go back to Florida, take all the gear. I was the tour manager and front of house engineer and guitar tech. and I had a monitor guy and a drum tech, and it was the two of us. Oh, three of us, because we had one guy running the merch table. For those of you that don't know, anybody who doesn't know anything about the music business, if you ever go see a band in concert, and I implore you to go see local bands live, can't stress it enough. We don't get new music without those, every band that you see on, here on Spotify or whatever, they were playing a local bar at one point in their life. Buy the t-shirt.
Yeah.
When you go to see a band that plays live, even if they're playing the Enormo Dome, buy the t-shirts, because that's how bands stay on the road. That t-shirt, when you see a local touring band or a small band touring in a bar, and they say, hey, are you guys on tour? Yeah, oh, absolutely, we're on tour. That t-shirt that you buy, that $20 t-shirt, granted, they probably paid $6 to have it made, but that's how they eat and put gas in their tank and get things set up for the rest of the tour. That's how they function. Because anyone who believes that they're going to get rich with Spotify plays, and you and I can go through the whole thing.
I've talked to other artists about it on here, yeah. And I've also talked to people like Hudson Valley. They have a standing gig at Blake Shelton's club, Red, Old Red, and so they're the house band basically. So they have a steady gig, but most bands don't have that. Yeah, they don't have that luxury.
Almost none of them do. And if you're touring, especially now, gas is expensive. Diesel, it used to be that we would always rent diesel trucks because diesel fuel was, $1.25 cheaper than gas. So we'd always want to get the diesel. Now it doesn't matter anymore. Diesel and regular fuel are the same. But yeah, I can't stress this enough. That's how those guys eat, because you can only have so many deli trays and so many Little Caesars pizzas. Now, the upside was when we were in New York, which is where the guys from the Spin Doctors are from, and there's a live Spin Doctors show on YouTube floating out there somewhere. I mixed that show.
Okay.
There was a show in a little club. It wasn't the Iridium, but it was a couple of blocks down. It was a couple of blocks away from the Iridium. The Iridium Theater is where Les Paul had a standing Monday jazz night. Nice. And there's a club in LA that does the same thing called the Baked Potato, and the Baked Potato is like 20 people can fit in the place. But you go to the Baked Potato or the Iridium, and depending on who's in town, you'll get Steve Lukather from Toto sitting on stage with, he'll be sitting on, when Les was alive, Les would go down and play, and whoever was in town, you'd have Eddie Van Halen, Steve Lukather, Vi, and some schlep from, some dude from Yonkers, all sitting in and jamming on stage at once.
Like the Viper Room back in the day. Back in the mid-90s. Yeah, very much like that. And like actually at the Viper Room, my buddy, my friend Alex Kane, who is in, God, I sound like a name-dropping jackass, don't I? It's okay.
My friend Alex Kane, who's a producer, he used to be in a band called Life, Sex, and Death, which is arguably one of the greatest hard rock performance art pieces that didn't really catch on and was actually killed by Beavis and Butthead.
Really?
Yeah, there's an episode they got to be on Beavis and Butthead. Mike Judge actually really liked LSD, and Chicago guys, they're really great. What was the way Alex described them? They were the Beach Boys plus the Ramones. I'm sorry, Cheap Trick plus the Ramones with a little bit of Slayer thrown in for fun. Okay, so really, really great band. But their lead singer was doing basically a performance art piece while he was kind of losing his mind. He was bipolar and nobody knew what it was at the time.
Okay.
So his family was very, very wealthy. And Stanley used to go up on stage in this like Louis Vuitton suit that looked like, and I'm pretty sure that he actually rolled in dumpsters in and smelled like a homeless guy and looked like a homeless guy.
Wow, okay.
And he would come walking in and everybody like, what's going on? And the smell, like they were like, he used the theatrical stink for a long time that was supposed to smell like a rotting corpse, and it did. And it would literally, he would walk in, you would catch it outside like 5 minutes before he walked in, and it would sting your eyes.
Oh.
It was that bad. Well, then he'd go up on stage and he'd have a piano on stage and he'd play the song called Blue Velvet Moon, which was him playing this beautiful piano piece and singing with this. And then all of a sudden the rock band would kick in and everyone was like, what is this? I don't know how to deal with what I am seeing on this stage.
Was that kind of how Beavis and Butthead reacted? That's why he got killed, or what?
No? They played their video. They had a video for a song called "School Is for Fools," and all Beavis and Butthead they were like, "This sucks. These guys are stupid. Like this is lame." Like the whole time, and I'm just watching Beavis and I was excited. These are Chicago guys. These are like these. You know, I saw these guys playing at a bar called Haymakers when there was 7 people in the room, and 4 of them were bartenders. I mean, it was, yeah. I mean, yeah, we know Chicago people just, you know, they got this. And Alex says to this day, like Corey Taylor from Slipknot in his solo shows plays 2 LSD songs in his solo band. Like, right? It's like these, you know, Marilyn Manson did a cover of one of their songs called Fucking Shit Ass, which is hilarious. It's actually the story behind the song goes that a member of a very, 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 very popular LA band actually stole the singer's wallet. But the first time they went to LA before they were doing this whole performance piece thing, they were a band called Bottoms Up, and they went to LA. And rumor has it was a member of Rat who's actually deceased. Picked his pocket and stole it, you know. And the opening song of the opening line of the song is some fucking shit ass stole my money. Some fucking shit ass thinks he's funny. Okay, because it was like he picked his wallet just to prove he could. But yeah, so like these songs, there's bands that love this band, and Alex to this day is like, I have no idea why you people are so rabidly fans of this little band no one's ever heard of. And it's funny because I think back to hearing about bands like Poco and Baby, which had Jonathan Wade in it, and there's all these bands that people that you never really you heard of. Like you'd hear of, you know, who are your influences, and they'd list these bands you'd never heard of, so you'd run out to the local record store and try to find those records. LSD's a band like that, like King's X as well, which is another, you know, band that everybody was one of the greatest bands that never really made it. You know, YNT is another one of mine where they opened for everybody. Motley Crue's first tour was opening for YNT. 3 years later, YNT was opening for Motley on Theater of Pain. And Dave Menichetti's still playing to this day. It's like, what happened? How did we not be massive, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But you know, so looping back, so I get back to Thoroughbred after the tour with the Spin Doctors doesn't quite go off, and it's unfortunate because that tour was set to be a nationwide tour. We were going up the East Coast first, because we happened to catch really good weather, and we caught really great weather for it. But then as we came down through Pennsylvania, we were going to start going west, but Chris got sick and we didn't, so they had to kill the rest of the tour, which I was really looking forward to coming back to Chicago and saying, ha, I'm on tour. None of the rest of you morons are. I'm the guy that you guys all said wasn't going to do squat.
And now you have your tail between your legs, and
no, it's not my fault. You know, yeah, I couldn't help it. He got sick.
I know.
But then I get back. What's funny then is I get back to the shop, and as I'm walking through the shop, lo and behold, I hear, "Dude," behind me, and I'm like, "Oh God, what?" And I'm going now. I have at this point. I'm back for about 2 weeks, and I'm working at a venue called Ruth Eckerd's Hall. And Ruth Eckerd's Hall in Tampa is in that area is very, very much like the Vic is in Chicago, or the Riviera, or the Ryman Auditorium in Nashville. What's the one in San Antonio? I had it on the tip of my tongue and I just lost it. But it's one of these class, like the Whiskey. one of these venues that's just venerable, and everybody's played there. I was working at that point 4 or 6 shows of what became the Lilith tour, ultimately. But at the time was this is like 1993-ish. I probably got my dates wrong. It was Tori Amos and Alanis Morissette. Okay. And both of them were just starting to catch fire.
That would be 95.
Was that 94, 95? Okay.
Because You Ought to Know came out right around the time I left my first husband.
Okay.
So, yeah.
It was 95. Just before Jagged Little Pill hadn't quite dropped yet.
Okay.
It was, so it hadn't, so all right, so maybe
94.
94-ish. Okay. But I was about to go on that tour. That was going to be the big deal. And it's really funny. And it broke my heart when I heard that he passed away. But Taylor Hawkins was drumming for both bands at the time.
Oh, wow.
So he was kind of playing back. He was kind of playing in Tori's band. She only had a couple of songs that weren't her and a piano. Not that that's a slight on Tori by any stretch, because Tori Amos and a piano at that time was super powerful.
Yeah.
But Taylor Hawkins was playing in Alanis's band at the time. He had just left Sass Jordan, which Sass Jordan is one of those Canadian. She's the Canadian Melissa Etheridge. Actually, she was described as the Canadian Pat Benatar.
Okay.
So she's not that tall. She's little. I'd say God, Sass is probably 5'5", 5'6" maybe, but she's got all of the power in her voice that Ann Wilson has, with all of the grit of Janis Joplin and all the attitude of, like, I don't know, Joan Jett probably, or Lita Ford, kind of that. She's a rocker girl. She is a stone cold rocker girl. And, again, huge in Canada, had kind of a little bit of a twinkling of success in the States, but not much. Here I am. I'm showing my age because this is the early 90s, and Lord knows no one cares.
I'm older than you are, so
hey, hush up. We're not talking about that. So I was getting some stuff together for that tour, getting my system together and the like, while they were doing their shows at Ruth Eckerd's, and to hear dude behind me, I was like, oh God, this is not going to go well. And it didn't, because what it was the guys in a particularly popular death metal band called Cannibal Corpse that remembered me from when they played at the Thirsty Whale, and I was on the crew at the Thirsty Whale, and I was the only house monitor guy that was ever able to get the monitor so that those guys could hear themselves.
Oh no.
They had been playing a club tour, and I mean, Donna, I had the monitor system at the Whale was loud. The front of house system was even louder. This is a stage that was probably 12 feet deep. At its deepest point was probably 19 feet deep. It was probably 18 feet deep, but only about 16 or 18 feet wide. And it had like a 13-foot ceiling. So, I mean, it was just this pocket, and I could peel paint off the walls. I literally have hearing loss in my ears that correspond exactly with the Q wedge up here that I had to listen to try to hear anything of what was going on stage, and the mid packs and the bass bends that were right here to my left for all the years that I spent at that place. All the low end in my left ear kind of drops off at about 120 cycles, but in my right ear, all of the high frequencies drop off at like 4K. Mm-hmm. But if you look at my left ear, it does this, but then it does this. And in my right ear, my right ear goes like this. Wow. And then like that. So they balance off, because the human body does that. But apparently these guys wanted me to go on tour with them, so I did. So I lost the cool tour with all the good stuff and the good food, and I did clubs with a death metal band.
Why did you do that?
I didn't have a choice. That's what my choice was go on this tour, make $1,400. I was the tour manager and front of house engineer. It was 3 bands. I only had to mix one. This is 1994. Yeah, this is 94, early 95. Okay. I was making $1,200 a week with a $50 a day per diem and an extra $100 a week for being, on from side tips from anybody who, I did it because I needed to pay rent. It was bad. I was only going to get $450 a week and a $25 a day per diem to be on the other tour.
Understand.
So I took money and living in a hovel, living on a bus, over not getting paid anything but rolling through with really good buses and good food. Mostly vegan, but
I get it. I had a steady job and I had the opportunity to work on a TV show and make $1,000 a week with the possibility of having no job at the end.
Yep, the things we do when we're young and dumb and full of enthusiasm.
Well, I'm going to follow my dream. I'm going to pursue what I want to pursue.
Exactly. So I go on tour with the guys in Cannibal Corpse. Turns out they're 5 of the nicest guys in the world. They're absolute sweethearts. And I know that I'm ruining their entire reputation by anyone who hears this. Those guys have kids. They have their daughter. The guitar player at the time, whose name escapes me, who's like they had a revolving door of guitar players for a period of time. The one that was on my tour and I knew from the Whale, I think, was the second lead guitar player they had in the history of the band. And again, his name escapes me at the time, but his daughters would come out and they were the cutest little things. They were awesome. And they'd be running around sound check with big gun muffs, like the range shooting muffs, while we were playing. And, sound check was never a Cannibal Corpse song. It was always like an old Thin Lizzy track. We played Thin Lizzy songs. We played, jam on old Kiss tunes and stuff. And it was always funny because we could always get kids to help us unload and load the trucks, because we toured. That was one of the bigger tours I was on. We had a bus, an actual bus for all the band members, and the gear was in a 22-foot straight truck with a trailer behind it for merchandise. So we always, so it was dock height, and we needed kids to help unload stuff. Okay. For a $6 t-shirt, kids would unload the truck. Like I'd have an army of kids out there helping me unload trucks. It was awesome. So that was fun. I did that for a while there until, some hijinks. So I'm gonna break what everybody thinks about. Lots of people are gonna think, oh well, you were on tour with metal bands. God, the backstage must have been awesome. No, but all the partying everybody hears about, you used to read about in the magazines about how they had, Van Halen had all these parties every night. No, they didn't. They had a meet and greet, but early in a tour, you do that. Early in a tour, hang on. Early in the tour, that stuff happened a lot, depending on the length of your tour, by the way. If you were out for a year and a half, you couldn't party like that every night. You'd be dead. Even Nikki Sixx and the guys at Motley Crue couldn't party like that. There were lots of stretches where they would go to the hotel, pass out, get woken up, get in the van, go to the venue, do sound check, go to the dressing room, sleep, because physically you couldn't do it. I mean, your human body eventually will shut down. In my experience, you got a lot of that partying in the first 2 weeks when everything was still fresh and new, and we're doing it, we're doing this. And then in the middle of the tour, it was just a job. It was a gig. It was, we have to be here, bus call, sound check, sleep, dinner, venue, doors, show, rinse, repeat for the next 6 weeks. And then at the very tail end of the show, because it was a lot of, oh my God, we were almost done with this.
That one I will agree with, because there is a band that I was hanging out with them at the last show of their tour in the United States. And it was in New Orleans, and we went from Pado's to another bar, and then I was invited to go to the hotel with a friend for quote unquote underwear party.
Right.
I didn't go.
Well,
I have more common sense than that. But sure. Anyway.
No, we had our fair share of those. I mean, don't get me wrong. There were, there becomes a certain point. Like I was out with Cannibal Corpse. We were out for 17 weeks, going all up and down the East Coast. We got as close to Chicago as Dublin, Ohio. So we were, or not Dublin, Columbus. We hit Columbus. We had 3 days in Columbus and kind of went, okay, and then back, and then kind of went back. Whoever was booking our tours, I think, either had Tourette's or some sort of other physical abnormality that made them draw like this on a map instead of being very logical. The way, you know, I thought the best tours, the best tour I was ever on was with, we got subcontracted by Clair Brothers Audio. Clair Brothers, for those that don't know, is the biggest sound company. If you're going to a show to see anybody at a full-blown 20,000 seat venue play, it's a Clair Brothers show. They're Clair Brothers Showco, and I think they bought their Canadian competition or merged with them a few years ago. But that's literally they're the big dogs woofing. There isn't anybody else. When I was coming up, you had DB Sound out of Chicago, out of Des Plaines technically. And they did little bands, like they did the Rolling Stone Steel Wheel tour. They did Metallica.
Little bands. Yeah,
little bands. Metallica, Madonna, Gloria Estefan and Sound Machine, which the owner of that told me once that was the best paid they ever got. There was great band and they paid ridiculously well and he's like, and it's the same system we didn't do anything differently, but they just decided, they told us, hey, we want to pay you this much. And I went, that's 35% more than I would have quoted you. Sold. So, but yeah.
Go ahead.
No,
I was just going to say, back to the touring thing though. I mean, most people have this misconception, like you said, that it's all partying, and most bands will tell you that they can't go to sleep. And just because they're not partying per se with a ton of people doesn't mean they're not going back, getting drunk or intoxicated, playing pass out, get up, get on a bus, get on a plane, and don't even know where the hell they're at. That part is very much true.
That the old joke where the guy says, and they had it in a commercial for something, I don't remember. It was like, thank you, Cleveland, we love you. Dude, Cleveland was last night.
Mm-hmm.
Is true. The Scorpions, when the Scorpions would tour back in the old days, they had on Klaus Meine's monitor wedges, they had a giant piece of white tape that would be the name of the city that they were in that night. Because those guys toured for Iron Maiden toured for 19 and a half months straight.
Mm-hmm.
Metallica was on the road with the Black Album for 36 months straight.
And
basically straight.
The same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, they were constantly touring all the
time. And it's hard. It's hard. It's hard on everything. And so for you to have those parties, and a lot of time those parties would be, it's the guitar tech's birthday. It's an excuse for, in the middle of the tour, it's an excuse to break the monotony for a day or two. Or, hey, we've got 3 days off in Miami. Woohoo! We can sleep this one off. And
I mean, when you talk about, and the misconception of things, let's talk about David Lee Roth. He was always known as the Wild Man. And then in the 2000s, suddenly he was a paramedic.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, and it's Brian May. Isn't he like an astrophysicist?
He is. He is, in fact. And Brian May is, in fact, an astrophysicist.
Yeah.
Jeff Skunk Baxter from the Doobie Brothers and Steely Dan, defense contractor, and has designs guided missile systems.
Wow.
The actual guidance system is what he designs.
This is the thing. It's like we have such misconceptions. And I mean, yes, I've written the classic Sex, Drug, and Rock and Roll book. We know this. And I mean, the thing is, it is what we are sold because of TV show or movies like The Dirt, which I'm sure took some liberties based on that book.
Yeah,
but it's not really the whole story. Oh, no. Oh, I hate this. Am I going to disappear? Fuck. Yeah, you froze. I froze. Whatever.
Okay. You were saying, what you were saying about The Dirt and that, were there liberties taken with that stuff? Absolutely. Because in truth, had anyone, even what Nikki wrote in the book, even what those guys wrote in the book, if the actual truth came out, lots of those guys would go to prison. You know, the actual, you know, some of the, you know, the story of, you know, From the Dirt, the story of John Kolodner, their A&R guy, Nikki banging his girlfriend right then and there. Are we sure that wasn't actually rape? We don't know. We'll never know. Nobody's talking, nobody's telling, but if the truth really came out, I got a feeling a lot of things would be very, you know.
I've interviewed Servon Campbell. He's worked with John Oates.
Mm-hmm.
And he's talked to John Oates, and John basically has said it's a good thing we didn't have that we had back, you know, that we have now back then, because we wouldn't have done half the things.
Oh God, no. Oh, absolutely. You know, there's an old joke is that, you know, I'm so happy I did all the dumb shit I did before there were cell phones.
Yeah.
You know, it's true because quite frankly, you know, I'm not saying I don't want there to be any misconceptions. I was no angel. I never took some things as far as a lot of people did. I mean, you know, there's some guys in a band that I just recorded about a year ago, actually. Got them in the studio. The CD is cut. The Mud Facade CD is coming out. It's what we joked and called it Mud Facade. Band was called Mudface. When I met the singer and the guitar player, I was running the backstage area and the load-in area at a theater. And I was standing on the load-in ramp trying to get three bands in and 2 bands out after, you know, changeover time. Mm-hmm. And there were 4 girls standing there in the way, like literally in the middle of the traffic pattern, that were like, "Oh my God, this is backstage." And I said I had a particular line that I will tell you off air because otherwise, you know, I'm sure that nobody wants to hear what it was. But the guys in the band looked at me like, "Oh my God, you're my hero. You said that out loud." To this day, I'm embarrassed that I said it out loud. I mean, I was 22 and should have probably been arrested for it, quite frankly. But, you know, again, there were no cell phones. There was no video taken. There was no, you know, there was no social media outcry.
There was no cameras in the hallway at a hotel. So if you went up on the band's floor and you were talking to somebody, one of your friends squealed and the bodyguard comes out wearing a towel and nothing else and says, "What the hell are you doing here?" Nobody has record of this. And you're just like, "Oh, fuck."
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But, you know, and there's part of me that thinks that stuff has made music safe. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite comedians, the late great Bill Hicks, used to say that, you know, all those people that are doing all those rock bands that are doing all of those Mothers Against Drunk Driving commercials and don't drink when they make music, yeah, they suck. And you know they aren't high as fuck when they're recording. Yeah, those guys are terrible. And you know, I've listened over the years to a lot of articles with producers that, you know, produce the records that I love. Max Norman working with Motley Crue on Shout at the Devil and Theater of Pain, and Beau Hill talking about the guys in Rat, and Don Landy and the Van Halen's producer, whose name escapes me at the moment, which is embarrassing because he's also the Doobie Brothers producer, talking about how hard those guys worked and how sometimes it was awesome and sometimes it was work to get the records that we love, that we know and love, to actually get the performances out of those guys. You know, it was hard. And I've produced records before. I know how hard it is. And I didn't, you know, and I never thought in my entire life, you know, I thought it was going to be easy. I went to school, you know, I'm not a college graduate. I'm 7 credits shy of actually getting my diploma, but my degree doesn't actually exist anymore. So I was a recording arts and sciences major with an artist management minor, which means I was pushing cases and coiling cables. It really, yeah. You know, but the time I spent in the studio is magic. The studio is church. And I've been fortunate enough, and I'm working with a couple of bands now. There'll be a couple of things probably in the next year that are going to come out that have my fingerprints all over them. And the producer part of it is so much harder than I ever dreamed it was going to be. Engineering, with the dawn of, and back in my touring days, we were kind of the pioneers. We're at the bleeding edge of digital consoles. And all of that stuff came, all of the digital stuff came up, and the things that now that they can do, I can produce a 260 track record in my laptop.
Mm-hmm.
In my on the table that all my stuff is sitting on right now is, I had to pull the 32-inch monitor out because because the light from the monitor washed out my face. But I can pull that up on that, on that screen now. And we got to that point because, again, let's, going back to the economy, back in 2002, 2003, when the first gas, when the last big gas crunch hit, mm-hmm. all of a sudden bands couldn't tour with 17 or 20 semi trucks. All of a sudden the touring companies are like, yeah, you got to cut half of your figure out how to make the same production with half the trucks because gas is too expensive. That was back when when they lined up diesel fuel with gas, was in the early 2000s. Once that happened, all of a sudden, that's when a lot of that stuff happened, and you realized that you could put in a digital footprint. You didn't need a 90 channel console or two 60 channel desks next to each other. Hey, we can have one desk and flip scenes, and do that. And the guys that, and that's where, I miss the days of big, ugly Grandstack PAs because that's what I grew up on. Walking into a room and seeing what, we used to laugh about the psychoacoustics of walking into a venue, looking on stage and seeing two gigantic black boxes of noise, one on each side of the stage. And it looked loud and it looked angry and it looked awesome.
Everybody had their monitors in front of them, and now It's like, oh, I got them in my ears.
Right. Which so I have this running, what I call a running gun battle with the guitar player that I work with. He does not like in-ear monitors at all because the times that he's tried to use them, they weren't fitted to his ears. They were the bottom end, cheapest ones they could get their hands on, and the battery pack and the body packs were terrible. They didn't have long enough cables, so he would always, like, if he looked down, they'd pop out of his ear, or he'd pull it back. All of the, and I keep telling him, I keep saying, Maddie, everything about that is wrong because you did it the wrongest possible way. You looked at all of the possible ways to make this a bad experience, and you chose all of them.
And you were successful.
And you succeeded in it being the crappiest experience known to man. And so I am having this running gun battle with him. Now, in the same band, the other guitar player has agreed to go to ears, and he's saving his money to get the molds made. Our singer has ears. Our bass player is leaning is sort of he's that sequoia that's been cut in the forest and is starting to lean over a little bit, and it's going to eventually fall. Our drummer's been playing with headphones for years, and now he's gotten ears so that it's a little easier. So I just got to get Maddie. I got to get Maddie over the fence. So from an engineering standpoint, love in-ears because I don't have as much stage noise to deal with. Because I don't have monitors coming this way and amps coming this way and microphones in the way and phase cancellation and bleh, all that. I don't have that. At the same time, I understand from a musician's perspective, if you can't hear yourself, you can't sing, you can't. I get all that, but I still miss having, Jason McMaster from Dangerous Toys had the best monitor system ever. He used to bring it with him everywhere he went. It was 6 10-inch speakers, those little baby monitors, little itty bitty ones, and he would set them up in a circle, so he would run across it like a ramp. It was awesome, but they were his, so he could do that. It was fun. Those guys were a gas. I got to say that as rambling as this interview is, I've had a really great career in the music business. It was a lot of fun. I did a lot of things I shouldn't have. I did a lot of dumb shit that probably should have gotten me killed.
But the thing is, your career is not over.
No, not by any stretch. I'm mixing your podcast. I'm doing the sound editing on your podcast.
But you have more than that. So
please. Yeah, I got a couple of things that are coming out, but I have a lot of ways to go, and mm-hmm. I have one particular artist that's kind of been a boat anchor that is going to get cast aside this year if things don't change really soon. Unfortunately, I'm going to be releasing them from their not actually signed but handshake agreement with me to move on. I've got a couple other podcasts coming down the line that are where I'm in discussions with to do their production as well. But you're always going to have priority, just so you know.
I'm not worried. I've cut it down to one episode a week, and I'm not worried.
Yeah, you do an amazing job, by the way. I gotta say that and I will say this, unlike a lot of other creatives I've worked with, you don't take my suggestions for change personally.
No.
You look at it, and I don't know if that's your radio background or not, but you say, okay, he kind of, the chubby guy with one eye over there, he kind of knows what he's talking about. So I think I'll do this.
We used to have air checks.
Yep.
I never turned in my tapes.
Why?
Because I hated the way I sounded. I have some of my air check tapes still. I hated the way I sounded.
I gotta hear some of that stuff.
I never turned them in. And so for you to say that I don't take this personally, and I don't, it's because I've matured enough. I think putting out my own book, because that was mm-hmm. like the biggest thing of putting my own self out there.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of said, okay, this is it. You either take it or leave it. And if you have something constructive to say that's going to improve it or improve what I'm doing, then fine. But if you're just spouting shit to spout shit, then I'm going to tell you to go fuck yourself.
Oh, there you go. Well, and I've had resume generating events a lot over the years. That's what I call those. Go fuck yourselves.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, you've given me constructive criticism to try to make a show better, and
mm-hmm.
that is good to have, because when you're doing something by yourself, you are looking at it from a very narrow parameter.
Right.
And I'm flying by the seat of my pants. I didn't go to school for this.
Nobody did, and it's you were smart enough to embrace a podcast as, oh wait, it's a radio show.
Mm-hmm.
That's really all it is. It's a radio show.
Mm-hmm. And you get to talk about whatever you want.
Right. So and use whatever language you choose. So
as long as you flag it.
That's the trick. So what else you want to talk about? Anything or are we season 6? This is season 6, right?
No, it's not. This is season 5.
Oh, it's still 5. Okay.
This is the end. This is the end of season 5.
Beautiful friend, the end. Sorry.
The end. It's like we're gonna put the bow on it, and that'll be it. And
this is gonna be the bow. Okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, it was supposed to start the season, and it ended up being the end of the season, because last time we had problems too. Remember?
Well, yeah. So that's my fault, because I didn't realize that this thing was gonna drive as hard as it was.
It's okay. No, I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like, and for the people listening, it's like, I'm sorry, guys, that I was doing 3 episodes, and all of a sudden I was like, hi, I'm just doing 1, but life has gotten in my way, and so it's down to 1 episode, and it's being extended out, and season 6 most likely will end sometime in November.
So here's the thing, that's the beauty of this medium, though, is that you're not tied to a hard date.
Mm-mm.
You kind of, I mean, yes, if you're looking at the SEO and all of the background metrics, absolutely you want to make sure that all of this is in, your ducks are in a row and all that, and content comes out at regular times and intervals and all that other BS. I read some of that stuff and it made my eyes bleed. I was like, oh my God.
But here's the thing.
Wow, people know how to take the creativity out of it.
I check my stats. Yes, I check my stats. I check the location to see where the stats are. I see how many plays. But quite honestly, I am not sitting here promoting it hard, pimping it hard. I don't do that with my books, which is maybe my downfall. But I do this because I want to do it. I want to have a conversation with somebody. I want to have a fun. And the moment it isn't fun, that's when I'm going to walk away.
Well, yeah, because that's how everything should be.
And that's
if you're not enjoying it, there's why do it.
That's why I, besides a lot going on, that's why I quit doing the live show, because it wasn't everything I wanted it to be.
There you go.
So on that note, is there anything else you want to talk about?
Not really, other than, anybody that's, you can find me at rich.zai@30audio.com. I'm happy to, critique whatever. Always looking for things. I still have to rebuild my website. It's been kind of a dead zone for a while, and that's my fault. Something crashed somewhere along the line and I lost everything on it, and I have to rebuild it. And unfortunately, my day job has been sucking up a lot of the time that I have to do all the other stuff that I want to do. And we, at some point or another, we should probably schedule one of these to talk about the other stuff I do, not just the sound stuff.
You mean like lacrosse?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I coach that ridiculous sport and do other stuff and things.
Yeah, we can definitely have you back. And
sooner or later, I might be a mediocre golfer. I mean, hell, that could be fun too. So. All
right. Well, I'm gonna wrap this up for the recording. So it was quite an interesting interview. It's something that Rich and we've hung out a couple of times. I'm friends, how that all came about is I was friends with his wife, and we started talking about my book and his book that he's been writing, which is very interesting. And I hope he actually gets it finished. But we became friends through her, and lo and behold, as I said on the show, I wouldn't be doing the podcast if it weren't for him supplying me with the equipment. So I'm thankful, grateful for him. I hope you guys had fun on listening to us talk. He is really a great guy. And, if you are if you want your music produced, if you want to talk to him about having him record with your band, he's open to all that. And you just need to drop him a line and sit down and talk to him. He's really a nice guy, and he's easy to work with. So I would highly recommend, if you're looking to do, if you have a project that you want to work on, I'd highly recommend him. Anyway, on that note, yes, this is the end of season 5. Hard to believe I've been doing this for 5 seasons, but I have. So this is the end of season 5. And if you've missed an episode, you can find them at the better2podcast.com website. And as always, you can drop me an email at Dauna, DAUNA, at better2podcast.com. So that's if you have a question, comment, or concern. Season 6, well, I've already started taping season 6. In fact, I'm about halfway through. So I have some really interesting shows coming up. I have some metaphysical guests. I have a children's author. I have, let's see. I have Peter Paul Parker's coming back. Sir Von Campbell's coming back. I'm sure, possibly, not positive. I'm sure if I want, I can ask Sarah to come back because we always have fun. Zagan Trusty, he was the 3rd guest from season 1, and he had talked about coming out gay in the 80s. This time he's back talking about having 2 parents that are alcoholics. And as far as Peter Paul Parker, he talks about the dream method. We're going to open up season 6 with his show, and I believe that is the first week in July that will be airing. And the dream method is actually talking about helping us get out of negative thoughts. But we also talk about gardening and UFOs, as well as, well, politics. And he's over in Great Britain. So we talk about the dynamics between American politics and British politics. So anyway, I hope, like I said, you guys have a great couple of weeks. I think I'm going to take a couple of weeks off, at least for air purposes. And I hope you enjoy season 6. And I thank you guys for all the support and for following us. It really does mean a lot. And well, I'll catch you in season 6 and catch you next time, guys. Bye. Better 2 podcast is mixed, edited, and produced by Rich Zai of Third Ear Audio Productions.